Welcome everyone. I am Jennifer O'Brien, Program Director of the Community Foundation, and I wanted to thank you all for joining us today to talk about our Women and Girls Grants process for 2020. As you will hear, we've been doing a lot of work internally and with our nonprofit partners in an effort to bring equity and inclusion to the forefront of our work. Additionally, the foundation has sought out opportunities to make an impact on persistent challenges in our communities through policy change and advocacy. Today, we want to bring you up to date on our priorities and engage you as community partners. First, you will hear from Foundation President and CEO, Miriam Elahi, on our vision for equity and social justice in Eastern Connecticut. Then Deb Petit, Program Officer, will give an overview of the Women and Girls Fund timeline and application processes. And after that, Randy, who has joined the foundation as our Equity Officer, will talk about what can equity and social justice look like in your projects, including case studies and lessons from the field. Please note, we have a lot of people on this webinar, so we're going to ask all questions to go in the Q&A section of the Zoom, and we will address the questions at the end of the presentation. If you have a question that hasn't been answered or questions specific to your organization, we're happy to talk to you at your convenience, and we'll include our contact information later in the webinar. And of course, it's on our website as well. We are recording this session, and the link will be added to our website next week. Now I'll turn this over to Miriam Elahi.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope that you're all staying well and safe in these days of COVID-19. We wanted to give you a sense of our journey as we have come to a place of greater focus on racial equity and social justice. Years ago, we started doing some work with consultants taking a deep dive with our board and various program committees into the work that we were doing around our grant making with the thought of having deeper impact in our entire region. It became pretty clear to us that our work, while focused on ensuring that we supported the most vulnerable in our region, was not equally focused on racial equity, advancing racial equity and justice. So in the last couple of years, our committees, the board, staff, and a number of our nonprofits have been involved in doing a deeper dive with the help of a number of consultants. About a year and 4 months ago, we were very fortunate to bring onto our team Randy McRae, who is our equity officer, to help us with a very focused vision on incorporating racial equity into everything that we do at the foundation. So that has helped us develop as we visited our strategic plan. We have now clarified our vision to be one that is focused on advancing a healthy, thriving, sustainable Eastern Connecticut with greater equity for all. Our values are integrity, respect, courage, empathy, and equity. And so we thought that we needed to have a conversation with our partners, with folks who are doing the work on the ground, to get a better sense of where we're falling short, how we can advance our vision of greater racial equity in Eastern Connecticut, and to also be thinking a bit more deeply about the work that we're doing to address public policy and systemic change to turn around the challenges that we are facing in Eastern Connecticut. Clearly, not every organization is poised to address systemic change, but collectively, we have a voice that can bring that about. And part of what we want to talk about today is what that looks like and how we can move forward in doing that work. We seek partnership with you in moving forward. Many of you are further along in terms of the work that you've been doing in your organizations, and we all need to learn from each other and to share as we are encountering various challenges. We want to work side by side with the municipalities in this region to advance racial equity across our lines. So with that, I'm gonna turn over the mic back to, I believe it's to Deb.
Thanks, Miriam. Before Randy shares more about our equity and justice work, I wanted to give some just kind of practical next steps around this year's process for grants. So the application this year is open. It closes at 5 o'clock on Thursday, October 1st. And thanks, Randy. This, where I circled here, this little access to online grants dashboard is the link to actually log in. This is a new system that we started earlier this year, which for some of you may not be new anymore. You may have used it already this year, but for some of you, you may need to set up a new profile in order to get started. So just consider that in terms of the time that you put into this. It's again called the Online Grant Center, but you'll notice the URL says grantinterface.com, and I'll explain in a moment why that's important. So the applications are due October 1st. We have committees for each of the Women and Girls funds that are made up of steering committee members and other members of the committee to bring a diverse group of voices together. They then spend roughly 4 to 6 weeks reviewing the applications, deliberating together, and together making recommendations to our Board of Trustees. The Board of Trustees will meet and approve these grants in early December. We give them the docket just before Thanksgiving, so we do need to have those recommendations done in November, essentially. So once the board has approved the grants, staff, Jennifer and I will contact all of applicants and let you know whether you got a grant or not. And for those who do get grants, this new online system requires an acceptance form in order to kick off the process for us internally to cut a check and send it out. That happens in about 2 weeks, within 2 weeks of the acceptance form. Now, for those of you who have 2019 grants, we still are using our old system for reporting on that year's grant. So this is where the URL is going to look a little different. This one is smarterselect.com, which is our old system. You'll go on there, fill out your report for your 2019 grant, and then once we're all done there, we'll stay in this new system, hopefully for a very long time. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us about that. So essentially, October 1st till December, first week in December or so is our season this year. That's it. On to you, Randy.
Thank you, Deb. Once again, my name is Randy McCrae, and I've recently joined the Community Foundation as the Equity Officer. And we, as Miriam shared, when we started doing this work and looking at what would some of the projects that the foundation would support with this expanded vision, we wanted to share a couple of the partnerships or organizations who we funded that really address systemic change. And we wanted to kind of give you some examples of what that might look like in your projects. So we have 3 entities that we've supported over the last year that kind of intersect with many of our priority areas, right? So we look at basic needs and rights. The foundation supported the Connecticut Fair Housing Center, and the Fair Housing Center looked at the inequities to affordable housing access for marginalized groups. They did a report, and then they also empowered residents who might be experiencing housing discrimination with information on how they can report those experiences they were having, and then the Connecticut Fair Housing then moves forward on looking into those reports a little bit deeper and addressing them directly. They also collected stories from those who were impacted, like those who had been uprooted from their communities and had to move other places, and documented their stories and the experiences they were having with finding affordable housing in other communities. They shared those learnings with us at the foundation, with the board, and then they held several sessions out in the broader community to bring back that data. And they're currently looking at what they need to do to kind of address some of the inequities that they uncovered. And so we may see, as a result of that work, some opportunities coming up that might be related to policy and advocacy as it relates to fair housing and affordable access. The second project that I wanted to share was really when we partnered with the Connecticut Women's Education and Legal Fund, QUELF. We worked with them and the Women and Girls Public Policy Task Force, did some listening sessions out in the community to hear what were some of the issues that women in the community were facing around gaining access to things that would help them be successful. And then they were very actively engaged on the paid family leave legislation. They did a lot of mobilizing around the community, sharing information, and then providing tools for those individuals to actually engage at the state level and actually providing testimony or submitting comments on that legislation. And as you know, that legislation has passed. Last but equally important is the work that we support around hearing youth voices, which really trains and supports youth advocates. The product of their work was Schools That Work for Us. There was a widely attended interactive notion of the documented book that they have that was led and put together by students that was held in New London. And they have since been being actively engaged in the process for hiring new teachers, speaking out on matters that impact them in the schools, and really promoting their framework called Schools That Work for Us. You can reach out to Hearing Youth Voices to get a copy of that framework, but it's also on their website. The young people were also very actively involved in the legislative activities that led to the passing of the Public Act for African American and Latinx studies to be offered as elective in all schools. The schools have been working with the State Department of Education on developing a statewide curriculum that will be used, and then all schools are to integrate that curriculum by 2022. However, schools in New London and some throughout Eastern Connecticut have already begun to offer those classes to students in their schools. So these are just a few examples of what the foundation has supported over the last year that really intersect with all of our priorities around making sure people have their basic needs and rights, making sure that we're looking at policy and advocacy efforts through partnerships to advance systems change, right, to address many of those underlying causes that interrupt people's access to their basic needs and rights, and then really providing pathways for those who are most impacted by the issues to lead the conversation and be very engaged with the work that leads to systemic change. That is all that we have for now. But if you want to kind of think about your particular projects more and how they might align with these same priorities, you can contact Jennifer or Deb, and they'll be happy to help you sift through your ideas and see how it aligns with sort of our aspirations for equity and social justice through the Women and Girls Fund. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Jennifer.
Do we want to go into questions right now, Randy, or my final comment?
Sure, I don't have any open questions, but I would encourage anyone who is listening, if you have questions, please drop them either in the Q&A section so that we can see them, or you can put something in the chat feature. We have new attendees on the call who might not have been here at the start, so they may have missed some things. But if you have any questions, or if you would like us to go back to a portion that we already covered, we're happy to do so. Just let us know either in the Q&A or chat function. While we're waiting for those questions to come through, Jennifer, do you want to talk about some frequently asked questions you've already heard or things you've already thought about, and that may get people thinking of some more targeted questions as you're going through that.
Sure. Yep. So, I think some of the questions that people will have is, you've been funding a certain program. It may be around financial security or domestic violence. Would that still be eligible? And, the short answer is yes. I think what we might be looking for this year is we're asking some more specific questions in the application about your program planning, how you include the voices of your community, if you do, but maybe a little more information on your population. We expect the grant pool not to look vastly different than it has in past years, but we are definitely looking to move along the scale and have more proposals aimed that may be from grassroots groups we haven't heard from previously, maybe more focused on doing some advocacy, which could be local or it could be at the Capitol. So we're open to your new ideas, and maybe you've asked us for something, a program proposal for years, but this will jog some ideas that other things you want to implement or other aspects of your work.
So then I have one question here that I do want to share, and I think you might have addressed it, but this is more specific. Carter Lennon asked, the examples you gave seem to be tackling macro issues. Will the Women and Girls Fund still be interested in funding programs like mentoring? So I think you kind of addressed that a little bit in your answer, but I just wanted to kind of acknowledge that she asked the question.
Yes, thank you, Carter. So along the lines of what I was saying, I think this year we would ask you to include a little more information on your population, and you can also talk to us about strategies for kind of reaching it deeper into the community to students who normally wouldn't apply for your opportunity. We're happy to brainstorm with you if we can offer any helpful advice or make any connections. But certainly, we do anticipate funding many of the same types of programs. And if you look at our, 4 pillars, they remain the same around financial security, preventing domestic violence, women's health issues, and so that will not change.
Jennifer, if I may add one caveat that I know that we talked about, we're also looking to hear from you. So as you're going through your applications and you're reaching out to Jennifer and Deb, and if there's some areas that you wanted to kind of venture off into to elevate some of the issues, like if you're doing some work around domestic violence, but you notice that there's these repeated patterns or barriers women that you're serving keep running up against that you want to dive deeper into, I encourage you to share that with Jennifer and Deb so that we may be able to strategize together about how we would look at that from a systemic perspective. We have another question as well. Nancy Genting said, would we be interested in a proposal that would address health inequities? So I'll let you answer, Jennifer.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely, Nancy. Feel free to call Deb or me or Randy to kind of discuss the details, but we'll help you brainstorm, or you may have a fully formed idea, but absolutely is the answer to that. From this fund, obviously, it would be for women and girls specifically as the population that we're looking at.
So I don't have any other questions in the box or the chat at the moment. So I just want to invite participants, if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat or in the Q&A box. We'll make sure we answer those.
And while you're doing that, oh, go ahead, Miriam.
I wondered if you could talk a little bit and distinguish between the Women and Girls funding process and the Neighbors for Neighbors.
Yes.
And
Right, that's what I was about to say, thanks. While you are here on this webinar, I wanted to also make note of our Neighbors for Neighbors Fund grant process, and there may be a lot of overlap with the work you're doing on women's issues, but for those of you who don't know, we established the Neighbors for Neighbors Fund as a result of the pandemic, and we made a first round of grants in the late spring, really emergency grants, and we tended to focus on food security, housing security, PPE needs, and technology needs. Those were the 4 big areas based on our application. And we know those needs haven't gone away, and in some cases, they have increased. We know, child care is going to be an issue going forward for working mothers as well. So I just wanted to call your attention to that opportunity, which is happening around the same time. The deadline is September 28th, and there's no penalty if you want to apply for both grants. We just ask that if you're applying for Neighbors, it's for support that you need as a result of the pandemic, which could be increased number of clients or increased needs of your current clients. Stephanie Clark is a primary program officer on that, but you can talk to either me or Stephanie, and her contact information is also on our website. Well, if
we have one other question, sorry.
Oh,
And this is from Megan. She noted that she had looked up this fund in the past and had saw it was really programmatic, programmatic, like after this workshop or in the series, this will happen. Have we talked about what supporting community organizing and campaigns outside of a programmatic workshop series? So I'm thinking that what Megan is asking is there any room for looking at efforts that are specifically centered on community organizing that isn't related to just a program or a series of workshops?
Right. I mean, I assume it would be community organizing around an issue, and absolutely. I mean, that falls into our advocacy work. We're very interested as a foundation on civic engagements. We have made some small civic engagement groups. So, Megan, I'm happy to talk to you about the specifics of what you have in mind, but certainly we're interested in working with community organizers, with grassroots groups. We're, trying to be flexible on fiscal agents, connecting people with fiscal agents if they need them. So, that sounds promising without knowing any of the details, but feel free to call me or email me.
Thank you, Jen. I think that answered, Megan, I hope that answered your question. So I don't see any other additional questions in the chat or the Q&A. I'm not sure if people still have want to ask questions. Sorry, scrolling by, hitting the key.
So we have a slide with our email addresses.
Yeah. Just wanted to leave this up just in case it would trigger people's thoughts and questions. But here is the contact information for both. Somehow your contact information isn't coming up, but yeah, here it is. Okay, there it is. Sorry, looking at 2 different screens. So here's Jennifer and Deb's contact information, which is also available on the website if you go under staff. And if you reach their voicemail or the front desk, we will make sure that it gets directly to them and you will get a call back in a relatively short period of time. And I'm sure they're excited to hear what your projects are and think some of the things that you're thinking about and how we can partner with you on expanding that to look at some systems as well as some direct support for basic needs and rights.
Great, and most of you probably know this, but Jennifer works with the Southeast Women and Girls Fund as well as the Norwich Fund, and Deb is the program officer that works with the Wyndham Women and Girls Fund and the Northeast Women and Girls Fund. So, and Randy's available to talk about questions around equity.
So I
So
don't see any other questions. Oh, one more.
Oh, yay.
One more. Is there any guidance on the amount people should request? And that came from Roberta Eccleston.
Oh, that's a great question. We have 4 different funds with different spendables because of the fundraising that has gone into them and the umbrella funds it's under. So that I encourage you to look on our website, and you can see past grantees. It'll also give you the range per grant cycle. So the Southeast is the largest, and we have the opportunity to make the biggest grants from that. Norwich is a smaller fund, and for now, because it's small, we've asked for proposals by invitation only for that. And Wyndham and Northeast are in the middle. So if you take a look at our website, you'll get a better sense. And it also gives past grants, so you can see what we have funded, and it goes back the last 2 years.
I don't see any other questions so far.
All right. Well, again, we're happy to talk to you as you put pen to paper or fingers to keys and questions that come up. And if you're new to this grant cycle, definitely take a look at the website, because that will definitely give you some guidance. And I just want to thank everyone. And I look forward to reading about your projects.
I don't see any questions, so I think, and I see people kind of exiting, so I think we're good to stop here, and people can reach out more directly. Well, one more question has popped up, actually.
Okay.
Carolyn Turner asked, will we be able to send a link to the recording for the webinar to the attendees? The answer is yes. It will go out in case you missed it, communication from our communications officer, Pam, and we just have to upload the recording and get it prepared. But yes, we will make it available. And then there's one other thing in the chat that I'm going to check on, and it's just said from someone who said thank you. So I think that we have answered all of the questions so far. And if there isn't any other questions, I think we're good to go for today. Thank you, Nancy. Thank you for coming. Getting a couple thank yous.
All right.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.